So number one, this video is an experiment because as we know, I can do plenty of edits within my core content, but I wanted to take the time to take a little bit more of a relaxed, casual approach. I'm going to try to be as unedited as possible to explore a conversation that has been on my mind for a while now, which is character design versus fashion design. Huge disclaimers, plenty of warnings. I have an aggressive tendency to go on tangents and to digress, which is why I've avoided doing a video like this for a while and why I haven't done it earlier on TikTok, and I've only really stuck to a non-speaking short form content because I don't want to, I feel contained by the 10-minute video duration limit, and I know that I can be as open-ended on YouTube as I can be, but I also know that that's like a detriment to people's attention spans. I'm already losing subscribers. I'm already fluctuating on subscribers anyway, and I'm probably gonna even lose some in doing this little experimentation exercise. But hey, I'm in my little bit of flop era anyway, which I don't believe in flop eras because I just believe that you can have a really good piece of content or really good production, but it just faced a very unfortunate series of circumstances. So I'm kind of in that phase right now. So it doesn't really matter what I do. So it doesn't really hurt to just try something a little bit different. And this could even evolve into lives potentially, because I'm huge on assessing the waters. Is anybody even into this? Is anybody even going to pay attention? Because if this doesn't even work, if I were to hop on a live, for 10 people and then try to get into some sort of relationship community building situation, which that's great even with 10 people, but you know what I mean? So anyway, what inspired me to explore this conversation for character design versus fashion design is, as I've grown my channel over the past year, which isn't even it's been a great growth, nothing too groundbreaking, but I think it's been pretty strong and I definitely appreciate it. I've noticed that there's a slight disconnect that has occurred between me and plenty of the viewers, which I get a lot of non-subscribers, so that's already, I think, a contribution and a little bit of kind of an arrangement for some disconnect, because they're not always very familiar or super down with what I got going on regularly. But when it comes to me looking at these outfits and fashions that characters have in fictional media, video games, anime, TV shows, whatever have you, I'm focused on the fashion and the outfits. I'm focused on what they're wearing, almost as if it's an isolated, separate piece within itself. But I can tell from the comments and just from the energy and even from the tone from time to time from some people, I see you, that there's this attachment, or I guess just this expectation that there should be analysis, perspective, feelings, more along the lines of and more in vicinity of character design principles and foundation versus fashion design. So I really was curious, what is it that's causing this phenomenon? I use the word phenomenon all the time because I just think it's a really great way to understand a sociological situation or experience, or just a certain happening that is taking place. And I'm collegiately educated in psychology, essentially. So that's why I tend to be fascinated by these more kind of psychological, sociological, interpersonal, groupthink dynamics types, topics and circumstances. So that's why I really just wanted to get into what is the root behind this, and what are the differences and nuances between character design and fashion design that could lead to this kind of interesting dialogue and just kind of differences in perspective that we have with regard to a lot of the content that I cover. And so I consulted ChatGPT. Well, I consulted Gemini actually. And with the new deep research feature that these different AI tools have, it is incredible. You could be as anti-AI as you want, but this technology is evolving quickly. It is extremely high utility. And based on some of the research that I've done, they are trying to do some environmental measures to make sure that there's a 5-year, 10-year plan to reduce any sort of environmental impact from all of this. So I know that that's a persistent concern that a lot of people have with AI, but I just wanted to kind of address that in getting into this. And so I was here's what I gave him the whole rundown, everything I pretty much just gave you. And so I got some really interesting reports on the nuances. And so I really wanted to unpack that in this conversation, starting with character design. And I think what I got right off the bat was just very illuminating. It's part of concept art. And art is the key word here, because when I first did my JoJo video, I was just It was great. The reaction was incredible. The growth was a surge. It was a rush. But what I noticed immediately was just the real glorification of Araki, which for good reason, like an incredible fashion designer, like informal fashion designer, incredible artist. And also mentions of manga and art books. Now, at first, when you're growing a channel, you're just kind of like, cool, yeah, totally. Like all these people into this video, like we have clearly a shared interest here. Like, come one, come all. Like everybody's welcome. The more the merrier. So like, I'm not really gonna discriminate. Not that I would ever really truly discriminate against any prospective audiences, but like, no matter what people are saying, like I don't know what's going on here. So it's just like, let's just kind of wait and see as the dust settles as I continue to grow, do more videos, like see where the interests really align and where we truly connect as a community. But then I started to really continue to see art books, manga, like just that whole conversation spill over into the subsequent videos, like Bleach, for example, where I really had no choice but to look at the manga because like that's where most of the incredible outfits that the Bleach characters have exist. And number one, I'm not into manga. Like if that wasn't already clear before, let it be like known now. Like I don't read manga, probably never gonna read it. I'm not really into reading anyway. It's never been my strongest subject. I've been above average, but like I've never been like highly advanced or like super into reading. Writing and math have been my top percentile subjects. Writing, surprisingly, despite how much I don't really get into reading. But like, anyway, I don't even read books on the regular. Like I'm much more of an animated moving form of media, video games, movies, TV shows, etc. So right off the bat, concept art, no wonder. And then having so many people say like, I'm as an artist, like with my art, like, oh, I thought I would be getting more like fashion people, like people who are into magazines or runway shows, or just like who might just happen to be into this as well, which I know I have people in my audience and my viewership who are like that, but just the volume of artists was a little surprising. But obviously knowing that now in retrospect, everybody's coming from more of a character design standpoint makes total sense, because through art, we can convey certain ideas and stories and narratives, which is also very central to a lot of what people find value in from a character design perspective. The lore, the world building, which is also a little bit of disconnect for me, because when it comes to like video games, especially, like I skip the dialogue scenes. I don't really like, I play video games for the action and the aesthetics almost exclusively. Call me superficial, and I think I've admitted this in previous videos plenty of times, but that's what art essentially is. And I think that we can develop attachments and deep, genuine, valid connections with concepts, whether it's like the concept of a relationship that we have with others, the concept of our own identities or oneself, the concept of reality. Like, so that really does give justification and grounds for why characters, even if they aren't really real, have a great basis for being tangible to a lot of different people. And so that's what character design is. We all know what it is, but I mean, like, and there's a lot of key elements to it that align with fashion design. I don't want to get too deep into this because like that's a little bit later in what I want to cover here, but I mean, essentially covering off on the basis of like the whole framework and outline and archetype and prototype for a figurative person. So personality, behavior, traits, but then more artistic things like shape, language, and silhouettes, colors, different things like that, all key components. And so I wasn't fully familiar with the character design process, which is why I think a lot of people, as far as also trying to kind of police the extent to which I do my analysis, or like how deep or valid my analysis is, because I don't always go into the whole background behind the design process of these different outfits and, in extension, these different characters. And there is a lot involved. Like, there's a whole bunch of different like reference materials and like storyboarding that takes place in order to really give strong grounding and framework and structure to who these characters are and how they come to life and show up and connect with the broader kind of like world that's being developed by a whole creative team. So it's really just a group of artists doing their thing. And so naturally there's just like a lot of research involved. Historically, I've never been a big history fan, which is why oftentimes in my videos don't also go into as much of like the fashion history, the art history. Art history was significantly one of my least favorite subjects in school. I was an art major for a year and a half, and I I just couldn't stand it because I wanted to be a graphic designer, and I'm just like, I just want to design cool posters and like big like things with like cool blocks of color and like big words and like advertisements. Really, I was intrigued by the advertising component of it. So I'm just like, why am I being sucked into all this? Like the main two things I got from art history was Rococo and Baroque. Like when I go to a museum, I can spot a Rococo piece of art and I can spot a Baroque piece of art, but ask me anything else about it and I'm lost. And I also just like don't care. But it is interesting to know. I'm not invalidating those who are interested in it. It's just obviously not a focal point of mine. And so in collaborating with writers and directors, etc., like with these different kind of character design components, it's refined through feedback. Like there's a whole situation that goes through it. So like if you're interested in becoming a character designer, like I would hope that you'd be familiar with all the different steps that are involved, which is why it is good to kind of like put your art out there and get different perspectives on it. Even if maybe people are only fixated like myself on one component of it, it can really kind of give you a good lens into maybe areas where you can double down on or just finesse further to, or just add more life to, just make it more marketable, make it more iconic. And that's kind of why I also really hone in on the outfits of it, because it's just like outfits are a great representation for anybody, and it's a key vehicle for contributing to someone's iconicism. And then of course the final delivery is concept art, is like model sheets, are actual models, like the actual characters within themselves. So that's actually kind of interesting to know. That does kind of give me a little inclination to maybe dig a little bit deeper into some of that, but I've touched on it like with regard to Bayonetta and a little bit with like JoJo. Maybe not so much Bleach Star or Sailor Moon. I know I did that too. But now fashion design, this is applying design principles to clothing and accessories. So when I've done my videos, and it can admit that it can get a little repetitive. It's just like, I'm honing in on the design principles. What do these accessories do to contribute to this outfit? What does this clothing say? Like, what's the vibe? All the time. The feel, the mood. It considers aesthetics, construction, and beauty. So there is, to an extent, a level of superficiality to looking at just the outfits of these various characters, or trying to bring in other things to enhance the aesthetic value or just kind of intrigue of how these characters are clothed. It expresses individuality and serves practical needs. It conveys something a little bit more introspective or internal. It communicates a little bit something more about the concept of one's identity. So it could also be fairly conceptual, but conceptual in a different way than like building out like a whole separate human being. Like, it's, what do the clothes function and how do they come to life almost within themselves? Naturally influenced by culture, trends, and history. I'm more so concerned about like the culture and the trends, more so the trends, but I really tend to double down on like the principles and like the design foundations. It balances appeal and wearability. I tend to get really caught up in like the more fantasy angle of like, I love fantastical, like, and high fashion runway can typically be a little out there. So still somewhat wearable, because we see that like even figures or like people who go to special events do wear these things. So there is some wearability, but it's really just like the appeal. Like, is there some artistic, maybe not full art, but like artistic value or some sort of visual aesthetic value that is really coming to life through the composition of an outfit or an ensemble? And it shapes identity, drives industry, and reflects society. There's definitely something much more macro and sociological about outfits and fashion outside of maybe, or in complement to the impact that a character could have at a sociological, broader kind of like cultural level. Key elements: shape, form, silhouette, line, color, texture, mood, principle, balance, proportion, emphasis, rhythm, contrast, repetition. And again, emphasizes individual and brand identity. I work in marketing and advertising. Spoiler alert, if anybody didn't deduce that by going to my website, like, I care about the aesthetics. Like when you're advertising and marketing something like a brand, like, and that's why I'm big on even my personal brand. XDF is my personal brand. Like that's a face, that's a facade, not necessarily like a sneaky facade, but like it's a forward facing external communicative thing. It's an ambassador for sharing and conveying different components or qualities of someone or something. And so that's why I'm like really always honing in on like the outfits first and foremost, because oftentimes that could be, don't judge a book by its cover, but like it could be a cover for people. We don't know. I don't know. We don't know the stranger on the street, but like if we see an outfit, like we kind of can get a little bit more from them depending on the complexity or the visual layering or just kind of dimension that it's providing to the viewer. Design process, like this is more business and more industry. Like they're both industries, like character development, art, and fashion, but like it's a different process. There's of course research and trends, but there's predicting future styles. I like the more innovative, like forward-thinking, like progressive, contemporary angle of fashion, which is why I'm always so pleased and I celebrate when character fashion can blend the historical and the traditional with something more modern, contemporary, and progressive. Then there's also a need to establish a theme for certain like clothing or collections, whether that just be something as basic as being like a new collection or a series of clothing available at a department store, or something that is developed by a fashion designer for their specific house in preparation for displaying to buyers and directors and merchandisers via runway shows. There are sketches and fabrics and patterns, and like there is an artistic process involved, but naturally it's more so focused on the materials and the relationship that all these different materials, fabrics, and items have in relation to one another to contribute to an overall clothing item or kind of theme or vibe or situation. There's different programs used to kind of go over the design. There's collaborating and sourcing on materials, manufacturers, prototypes. And then there's the presentations, runway shows, which is like the fun part for the viewers outside of just a business context, because it's just like, ooh, what is this amazing new vision that this fashion designer has, ever evolving, much more dynamic than just maybe a stagnant character, one-off, as memorable and as iconic as that can be. And then of course there's like marketing, collaboration, production, like just really getting it out there for selling purposes from a business perspective. So based on how I felt with regard to like people's reactions to my analyses on these character outfits from a character design perspective, obviously character design is much more context driven. Like when people, even when you're talking about the outfits and the clothing that the characters are wearing, people want to know, well, what is the context? Like, how are you going to judge the outfit if like you don't even know maybe why they're wearing that or like what the past influence is on the outfit? Okay. And clothing reinforces the character's purpose, role. It has it's paramount to really conveying and representing who that character is within that specific world. Maybe not our world, and maybe not in direct parallel to how that clothing would be perceived or function in our world, but in the world in which the character was conceived or inhabits. And in my personal perspective, this can limit some interpretations, and this is what leads to the disconnect. Not that I've received like an overwhelming majority of people who have been like, ew, but like I've had people really just be like, this is like, why do you like, what even is this analysis? It's so shallow. Like this is so surface level, superficial. Like you're just saying what you like and like because I mean, that's kind of what fashion should kind of do for you. It should be able to convey a mood, a feeling, a vibe, and you either kind of like that or you don't like it. It can lead to a lot of subjectivity, especially when you're looking at the outfit individually, like almost individual of the character. Like it's still clothes at the end of the day. Like just because it's a fictional character and they're in a special, unique universe and world of their own doesn't mean that the clothing takes on a whole new magical, like separate purpose of what clothing in essence of what it is supposed to serve. You know what I mean? Like, so that's been surprising to me. But then also it's just like, when I try to like think of ways to like style these characters differently, or if I wished that maybe a character's outfit evolution went in a different direction, like yes, superficial, subjectively wanting that from a very specific perspective, like from an aesthetic, visually appealing, beauty perspective. But then got the police, got the gatekeepers, definitely wanting to like reinforce why it is what it is. And like, I think we get it, why it is what it is. It's just like, it is still just an outfit, and it can be interpreted in a number of different ways because it's art, right? So that's just kind of not a big deal, but it's just kind of like, that's where I'm coming from. And that's where I've been like, what is that? And I've kind of unpacked that understanding and that realization over time. To me, fashion design could be a bit more macro than like just looking at something strictly from a character design perspective. You just have this one set like structure and lens in which to look at it from a character design perspective. But I think the fashion design allows a little bit of flexibility in how you could view it. And it allows appreciation of the style outside of the original context. That's what I've been trying to touch on, is like, just like a fashion designer, if they have it going down a runway on a model, it might give a certain type of mood or a vibe. And especially in the theme of like a runway show, or that maybe some of the theatrics involved, it might convey or just kind of exhibit something. But then on an artist, a public figure, someone else that purchases it, like it could come to life in a whole new way and bring that person to life in a whole new way. Like that's, I feel like, the fluidity and the dynamicism and how dynamic fashion is. And that's why I think it's fun to look at it in, again, not complete isolation from the character, but like somewhat individually, just to really establish more so the relationship between the clothing and design and beauty in relation to the character and maybe some of those special components. Not necessarily the special little trinkets either, like just really the whole ensemble, more so from a macro perspective. And I like to consider the real world applicability of like the styles. Like that's where I go into a lot of parallels. And I think that's open to a very interesting conversation. If you're ignorant to what's happening in the real world, which I largely am, to be honest with you, like I'm not completely well versed in like what's happening in current events and culture all the time. But like, if you are completely disconnected from it and you're like a little bit more absorbed and like really into escapism and like these fictional worlds, that can lead to a bit of like a loss or an absence of understanding as to like how a piece of clothing that a character is wearing could translate to something completely different or in a transformative way in the real world. And yes, transformative, like it's not just reacting to like, ooh, pretty outfit. It's just like thinking about different illusions that could be made cross-franchise, real world, like lots of different connections being made. And I feel like that does lead to transformative perspective and perception of these different characters or visuals. And so in thinking about the shared vocabulary, like that's where I'm just like, well, then how did I get all these artists and people rolling up in here? Like, I never said like, I was always like so confused. Like people wanted me to look at art books and like I'm just like, where's some people are just like, oh, I love video games, I love fashion, like this is my niche, like so specific to me. Like that's who I thought I was like talking to, which not to say artists aren't a part of that, but I feel like when there's just much more of like an artist identity coming through, I'm just like, well, then how are we, like, how did this get here? Like, how did I land on this side of the platform or like the digital universe? It's because of that shared language. Silhouettes, color, texture, styling, all key artistic and design components that do exist within both of those realms. And the personality and status component of the characters, because like they are based on real people, maybe not full-blown humans within themselves, they're just concepts and ideas, but they are, art imitates life. So that does give a little bit of one foot in, one foot out, that fashion can kind of play there, and that's where we tend to intersect. And again, these artists are doing research on real world fashion more so than I think even a lot of gamers or a lot of fans of certain piece of media want to even like acknowledge. It's been mind-boggling to me how people who are even video game fans, even of those that are maybe not the most stylish or like beauty oriented, could be like, what's this fashion nonsense? It's just like, you do know that your favorite video game, you do know that the developers did some research and based it off of something real. Like it's all connected. Like we are all participants in fashion to a certain extent. And because character design is encompassing of a lot of different artistic components, including fashion, there's naturally going to be some fashion principles taken into account just to make it real and not making completely like blank pieces of like squares or shapes on the character. Like it has to be based in something. But there's like, again, just emphasizing the divergence. Character design serves the narrative. It's more so focused on the role and that world building, that space. And that's why there's that emphasis on that coherence and context, while fashion design is more aesthetic appeal, trends, some functionality. I'm not maybe always the biggest, like, I don't always double down on that component, but then self-expression, blah, 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 we already know that. And so that's why I think there's value in analyzing character outfits for style alone. Like that's where it gets into the individual, like in like looking at the outfits by themselves, like the clothing items by themselves. A shirt is a shirt, pants are pants, a dress is a dress, a suit is a suit. And using these different, and not everybody's aware of these different fashion criteria. I have seen more videos within the past year where people have started to use this language. So it's like, okay, great. So like more people are becoming educated in that. Let's have a bigger conversation on it and understand what that means from like a more sociological macro perspective as to like what we're all kind of developing a consensus on. That's amazing. Like that's what these videos to an extent should achieve. Like we should be able to enlighten people and inspire them to kind of explore these discussions and these principles within their lens and their perspective on their favorite franchises in media as well, not only from a character design perspective, but also from a fashion design perspective, as it all just leads to appreciation of the core artistry that is taking place. Because at the end of the day, this is all art. And I've seen people come to that realization in the comments too. So that's not to say like, you don't agree with me. Like, I think your whole perspective's trash. Like, no, I think it's just like we all love to be validated to an extent. So it's like, do you understand the purpose of what's going on here? Like, this is like, especially from a creator perspective, like I just created this video. Like, do you get it? Or are you like trying to impose like a whole new purpose of your own onto the video, which is like kind of weird. Like, I don't know why you would do that. Like we're all here just to celebrate the artistry, which is, I think at heart, what really took place when I popped off with like my initial videos, and like what I'm still celebrating. I still love looking at the character outfits. Like I could do this all day. It's fun to do. Like it's just appreciation of art. Like I just don't, maybe people don't want to do it all the time, but I do. And then real world application, like I think it also just really opens the door and highlights and validates why these character designs can influence and inspire real world fashion, which is why we see runway shows and collections dedicated to different franchises and different media and different collaborations. Like that's awesome. And we could then extract what makes these characters so iconic, like the power that they have within their clothing, or maybe a little bit of that whimsy, and really drawing that connection to certain genres like cyberpunk, bohemian, cottagecore. Like that just really is what signifies the vibe that is taking place, and really packages it and helps broaden the circle of our understanding for us to really celebrate and participate and collaborate in that entire space together. Character design, and like a key example of how that evolution and everything coming together can look: cosplay. Boom. This is a big area where I also learned the hard way. On TikTok, I initially popped off during the pandemic because I was doing character inspired outfits. I saw how other people did it and I was like, that's cool, I want to do it too. And I was like just doing general fashion trends at that point. But when I started to do character inspired outfits, I was amazed at how much that like really resonated with people. It gets into the same thing that I'm experiencing now here on YouTube, where it's like, it's very fandom based, where it's just like, if people aren't into the fandom, then they're not going to be in, even if you do the same thing, which is character inspired outfits. Like it's the niche, it's a central thing. Some people may not celebrate and let a certain video flop because that's just not their favorite fandom, even though like it's all clothes and like it's all the same spirit of doing this in general. But I noticed that like as I continued to do it, I was challenging myself to get as congruent to the actual characters' outfits as possible, which I had never, believe it or not, heard. I didn't even know cosplay existed until 2020, 2021, maybe 2019, but like until like the past just 5 years ago. So I learned that like cosplay is a great example of like how the fashion that these characters have can be manifested in the real world, but it still kind of leans into more of the character design because it's costume play. Like they're really trying to more so embody the character and like literally live and function and imitate them. And that's why you can get more so caught up in like costumes, even like no shade, no tea, no shade, cheaply made ones that are just like Halloween versus like a character inspired outfit, which could kind of serve the same point, which is like what I was trying to accomplish without having to like act and like literally do the character complete 100% justice. It's a really fine line, but like I leaned into that community because because cosplayers are actually really nice people, really creative, really comfy, for lack of a better way to put it. But when you're someone who's like really more so concerned about the fashion, you get people who are more concerned about the character. So it's just a really interesting phenomenon that I've encountered like twice now, and I'm just like, I don't get it. But and also we have seen how like actual like anime manga styles have influenced like actual themes like Lolita, Decora, cyberpunk. Like those really did inspire actual wear and aesthetics and genres that people participate in from a fashion perspective today. Like I said, plenty of collaborations, and we can definitely just, yeah, fashion has influenced character design through storytelling, even to an extent, just based off of history and time periods and giving greater believability. But anyway, that's the conversation that I wanted to have around character design versus fashion design. I didn't digress as much as I thought I would, and this felt really good just to get out of my brain. Like, you know, like I love just being able to I research a lot of things independently, but I don't always like turn it into a video because like I said, like I don't want to be limited by a time duration. I don't want the fear of like people just dropping off because they're just like, what the fuck is this? Like, I just kind of want to be able to share thoughts and have a conversation. Cause like, if I were to sit down and have a conversation with somebody about character design versus fashion design, like this is what it would look like. Like I get more into my presenter mode on like my character outfit reviews and analyses because I don't have room to go on a tangent there. Like there's a specific objective, and I even cut some analyses of the specific outfits short because the attention spans are flimsy, and I'm not trying to like really just ruin what is a lot of effort of like editing and like hours of work. But with something like this, if y'all are down for it, I'm down for it. Or at the least, I hope this helps me find more of my MVVs, my most valuable viewers. And this is definitely type of content that I could turn into member only content as well. If anybody's interested, like I can talk about pretty much anything. All right. So let me know what you think. Let me know if this maybe helped any of your understanding around character design versus fashion design. And let me know what other topics might be interesting to cover, because this felt really good. I really want to just chill, relax, and just have a conversation. But anyway, if you made it remote, like anywhere near this point, you're so real. Like, God bless you. Like, you don't even have to be spiritual, religious. God bless you. Good fortune upon your existence, your life. But anyway, thank you so much. And until the next video, I'll talk to you later.